Well, and Sandy, it looks like we've got about 40 people here, and it looks like that's kind of, I think, leveling out. So if we want to get started, we can go right ahead.
Super. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I'm Sandy Ward. I'm with the Bellingham Whatcom County Tourism Office. We've been the destination marketing and management organization for Bellingham and Whatcom County since 1978. So we have a long history here in Bellingham and Whatcom County. And we are honored to have been invited to be an anchor organization to support the process as we move towards this maritime heritage process that's going to go on, and we're excited to be there and so delighted to support. So I will turn the time back over to Alex so that we can get started. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sandy. And I am going to just start screen sharing very quickly. So if anyone has been with us for one of these information sessions or conversations so far, you know that we like to turn the tables and ask a bunch of questions of you. So we're going to start out by asking you guys on a separate device or in a separate window to go to the web address that you see on your screen right now. Chris is also going to put it in the chat box. If you want to just click on it, you're welcome to do that. The address is www.polev.com/wtrust650. And I highly recommend just grabbing your phone and pulling it up on the web browser on your phone so that you can still see our beautiful faces as we go through this. And what you'll do is when you go on there, when you go to this website, you'll see a question. And that question is, what is your favorite thing to do along Washington's shores? Please answer with single words only. You'll see why we're asking that in just a minute. And we will be able to all see the results live. And we just think this is like a really interesting way to start this off and also get a sense of kind of what people value the most about our shorelines. I'm going to leave this up for just a second, and then I'm going to start showing the live results so you guys can see what everyone's putting down.
And I did put the link in there. Please note that the first link, I put the colon in the wrong place, but the second link should be live, and that would take you right to another browser if you would like to use that.
Okay, and I am going to go on to see the results, but if you do need that, if you haven't gotten to that web address yet, just check the chat and it will be right there. Chris, can you see the results okay? Because I'm seeing them.
It's populating. Yep, that's great.
So this is what you're watching now is you're watching all the live answers come in. This is why we asked you to use single word answers only, because if a word gets used more than once, it's going to get bigger. So right now you'll see that people really like, we've got a lot of kayak, coast, Olympic. I'm assuming that means visit the Olympic Peninsula. We're going to go with that. I also see a sunbathing in there. I didn't know it got warm enough for that, but we'll take it.
2 weeks in August it is.
Walk. Yeah, that always tends to be a popular one. And this is helpful info for us because first of all, it's fun and we love a good word cloud. But also this is, good information about kind of what people value, what people like to do, and what kind of activities you are doing along the coastline, the shoreline. As I have been informed recently, it is more accurate to say shoreline if you're also talking about Puget Sound. Oh, I see a seafood in there. I always like the seafood one. Okay, I'm going to leave this up for just one more second. And
we appreciate you all serving as guinea pigs as well. One of the things that I think Alex may have alluded to is because we're doing all of these virtually, we have to come up with some online ways to engage as well and make sure people are able to be interactive with this. And this is one of the fun ways to do it.
Yeah. It's
great to see everything in there.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like, I'll leave this up for just another second, but it looks like our biggest things that we like to do along the shores, kayak is definitely winning, but I also see walk, explore, kites, I like that one.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys kind of how the top answers from our statewide survey that is in progress. And we are going to be sending you the link to that later and asking you to do the full survey. But here are some of the big answers that we've been getting statewide. So similarly, walk remains a big one. Also take in the views, hang out on the beach. I didn't see sunbathing in there though, but that is good. So, okay, now we're going to ask you to go back to that website, and Chris will put that in the chat box again. It's the exact same site. If you already have it up on your phone or on your other browser, just leave it up. It should refresh. And now you're going to see a different question. So what we're asking now is what makes Washington's maritime heritage unique? So you can submit as many answers as you'd like. You are allowed to use more than one word on this one. And what you can do is as other people's answers show up, you can vote up for the ones that you like, just click the thumbs up, or you can vote down for ones that you don't like by clicking the thumbs down. And this is a particularly interesting question just to see kind of what makes our maritime heritage so special and so different. And I like that, so real. What makes it so real? So Chris, can you see the results on my screen now?
They are popping up, absolutely.
Fantastic. Yep. As Chris mentioned, you guys are kind of the guinea pigs with this. Sometimes the tech works, sometimes it doesn't. So we're getting there. So for those, I did also notice that we have some folks on the phone. So I'll just kind of read some of the top answers as they're coming in case you can't see the screen. The top answer right now is what makes our maritime heritage unique is tribal communities and historic forts and places from the past. So we've got like a triple answer there. We've also got orcas, a tribal fishing fleet,
That's great.
First Nations traditions, longhouses.
It's great to see all the input.
Yeah. Also, just going down a little bit, we've also have salmon fishing, access to so many islands and other Native American heritage, salmon and evergreens, good combo there.
Mm-hmm.
Unique history and sense of place. Small boat culture, that's an interesting one. I always love doing this because I think every group, every person we ask has such different answers for this. And I think it really shows just how many things about our coastline are so unique. So I'm going to leave this up. And as you probably noticed, you can see what other people's results are on here. So if you guys want to keep answering this throughout the presentation, if you have any brilliant things that you want to add to the list of things that makes our maritime heritage unique, we really do use this information that you give us. So please feel free to keep doing that. But just in the interest of time, I am going to hand things over to Chris now to get us started. Thanks everybody for your participation so far. We appreciate it.
Great. And I'm going to let Alex start to monitor the chat now. And if anything comes up from that standpoint, we can respond as needed. But I did want to start with a land acknowledgement. And I think as we're talking about the Maritime Washington National Heritage Area and talking about our coastlines and our shorelines, we understand that our tribal neighbors, our tribal communities have been here since time immemorial. So I just want to read quickly our land acknowledgements about this, and that is, we acknowledge that the Maritime Washington National Heritage Area spans the usual and accustomed lands of many tribes who play a major role in the history of our state. We honor and pay our respect to our indigenous neighbors who protect and preserve these lands and waterways as they have since time immemorial. We feel very strongly about that acknowledgement and will continue to do so as we host public meetings and public programming for the heritage area. So thank you, and we'll go on to the next slide. So we wanted to give, some of you probably have some idea about what a national heritage area is. Some of you may be on for the first time. So we wanted to give a little bit of a background about heritage areas overall, and then we'll move specifically to the goals and hopes around the Maritime Washington National Heritage Area. So NHAs, and I'll use that acronym so I don't have to repeat the long-winded phrase the whole time, but NHAs are designated by Congress. It does take a congressional designation through federal legislation to get designation as an NHA. They are landscapes of national importance. That's kind of the organizing structure of a national heritage area, is looking at the geography, at the landscape. And so they're landscapes of national importance with nationally significant stories to tell around the development of the United States, both past and present. It's not just about history, but it's about the continuing contribution that heritage areas have in the present, in terms of their vitality, in terms of what takes place in those communities, in terms of the stories they have to tell. So the program is a program of the National Park Service, but it's not like a traditional park unit. It's not like going to Mount Rainier or going to Olympic or going to North Cascades. The government does not assume any ownership of land nor jurisdiction over that land. And so it's entirely non-regulatory. And we'll repeat that. It's an entirely non-regulatory program. So there's not a park superintendent. There aren't rangers that are present and doing things from that standpoint. We certainly partner with the National Park Service, and of course, being a maritime-based heritage area, there are those units, some of which I mentioned earlier, which are within the boundaries of the Maritime Washington NHA, including Olympic, San Juan Island National Monument, Eby's Landing, and the Seattle parks, Klondike specifically. But ultimately, the goal of national heritage areas are really to build partnerships and work from the grassroots up, work from local stories to tell a broader kind of umbrella story about the theme, in this case, our maritime heritage. Next slide, please, Alex. This just gives folks a quick overview of the 55 existing national heritage areas across the country. And I like to show this because it does give people a good sense of migration patterns, I suppose, from east to west. And that has held true with heritage areas as well. The program was established in about the mid-80s, mid-1980s. But you can see from this map that there are relatively few on the West Coast, or excuse me, on the West overall. And there's really only 3 on the West Coast, one in the Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta area. And then we're fortunate to have 2 here in Washington State, Maritime Washington, of course, and then the Mountains to Sound Greenway National Heritage Area. Some folks may be familiar with the Mountains to Sound Greenway. It's essentially the I-90 corridor from Seattle to about Ellensburg. That is now officially a National Heritage Area as well. And I would point out that those 3 West Coast NHAs were all designated together along with 3 others just in 2019. So the designation is recent, and those constituted the first 3 on the West Coast. But you can see where the concentration has been historically. Next slide, thank you. So I mentioned that, yes, there programs of the NHA program is a program of the National Park Service, but it really is facilitated by a local coordinating entity. So at the local level, there's a group which ultimately manages and facilitates the NHA. In most cases of the 55 across the country, I believe 40 or 40 plus are managed by nonprofit organizations. There are a couple that are managed by local state agencies or commissions. There are a handful that are in college programs and college universities, college or university programs rather, but primarily they're operated by nonprofits. The Park Service does provide some technical support, some guidance on programming and on communication and outreach, and limited financial assistance as well. I will note that every federal dollar that comes down to support the NHA, every federal dollar must be matched by local dollars. But I think what's most kind of unique and really appealing about the NHAs as well is it's those communities, it's those people and residents which live and breathe the heritage area that determine how it can be most useful and how it will work. You know, what should it do? What should the goals be? What should the vision be? That's determined at the local level through the process we're going to explain as we move on. So what kinds of things do NHAs do? I'm not going to read through every one of these squares on here. I'll let you all peruse them as you're looking at this. But these are the types of things ultimately that heritage areas do. They look to certainly the historic resources, but also the natural and cultural resources within an NHA, and try to amplify those, build on those, and share those and support programming about each of those resources. So you see all these different ideas or different things a heritage area can do on this slide. Not every heritage area does all of these, but if you take the collective 55 NHAs, among all 55, you'll probably find each of these elements included over the span of all of the heritage areas that are out there. So there's really a broad range, a broad spectrum of the types of things a heritage area can be set up to help support, to help promote, and to lead in some cases. So a little bit more about our Maritime Washington National Heritage Area. There is a process, as I mentioned, it does need to be designated by Congress. Before you can achieve that designation, heritage areas need to make the case that they are worthy, that they have a nationally significant landscape and stories to tell. And that was done for Maritime Washington through a feasibility study that was really completed way back in 2010. And there were a number of groups involved, including our State Historic Preservation Office, which is the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. They really spearheaded the feasibility study efforts. There are a number of great groups involved in that. I'd like to point out and mention the Pacific Northwest Maritime Heritage Council. It's a council of heritage organizations that include not just Washington, but Oregon and British Columbia as well. But certainly some of the Washington representatives as part of that council participated in the feasibility study and have really been supporting this effort for more than just the last 10 years. But that feasibility study was completed and submitted to the Park Service in 2010, ultimately approved by the Park Service. And from there, we were working annually to get designation, to get the legislation passed by Congress. It took until 2019, so it was a labor of love. It took a while, but we're obviously thrilled with the outcome that we now have a designated NHA. So it does cover 3 miles of shoreline, certainly all along the Pacific coast, and then through the straits and all into and throughout the Puget Sound, including all the islands. It's about 3,000 miles of coastline. And then within that, you think about the interdisciplinary or multi-jurisdictional elements that are there. 18 federally recognized tribes, 13 counties, 32 incorporated cities, 30 port districts, so certainly many jurisdictions in there, as well as many sovereign nations in there as part of the overall area. We do like to note that while other NHAs that have been established in the country do have a maritime component to them, we believe that Maritime Washington is the first NHA that is really solely focused on maritime heritage and those stories. So benefits, what are the benefits of the heritage area overall? I won't read through every one of these things. I'll let you, every one of the bullet points, I'll let people do that on their own. I think the key benefit around it is we understand and acknowledge that people have been operating within the maritime sector, within the maritime arena, for decades, for centuries, millennia, as a matter of fact, around history, around heritage, around museums and interpretation, but also, of course, around commercial fishing, around recreational boating, around industry and larger scale commerce. And I'm missing, of course, many things, but ultimately there's been so many folks operating within the maritime sector. One of the real, I think, benefits of the Maritime Washington NHA is the potential to connect those stories, connect them across geography, connect them from potentially one jurisdiction to another, and be connected with this national story, the national significance of our entire region, of our area overall. And we think that there are really potentially advantageous benefits that come out of that from a local tourism standpoint, the economic benefits that come with that. Certainly being able to connect organizations and other entities with other funding sources, not necessarily that there's a direct NHA equals more money, but as people are working to go to foundations or within their own fundraising enclaves to be able to talk about a connectivity to this broader national heritage area effort, we think will bolster people's applications or stories, quite honestly, as they're looking to do fundraising on their own. And you do get to be, there is some importance, there's some value to being associated with the National Park Service, and NHAs certainly are. So you get to tap into that level of branding, and at the programmatic level to be able to say, yeah, we're affiliated with the National Park Service as well, and here's why. Here are the things that we have that are these nationally significant components. Next slide, please. So the feasibility study did include some goals overall for what a national heritage area could do. We've been working really, gosh, for close to the last year now on what I would call pre-engagement, pre-outreach work. And Alex will talk a little bit more about that, but it does include a steering committee that has been formed and has been meeting really since July of last year. And we've reworked some of those draft goals. And again, I'm not going to read all of them now, but you can see a sense of what we're looking at. These certainly aren't final. They will become finalized throughout the planning process that will take place over the next year. But this gives you a sense of what we aspire to do, what our goals are for the heritage area. Again, these might be collapsed into fewer, they might get articulated differently, but ultimately these are the types of things that we want to aspire to do. Each heritage area has themes. As I mentioned, their organizing principle or organizing structure is around landscapes of national significance, of national importance, but all of which have stories to tell. And so each heritage area has an interpretive plan involved with it, interpretive themes. And so the feasibility study identified 9 interpretive themes that could be represented throughout the heritage area. These are the 9 that they came up with. Again, these are draft. They'll be finalized as we go through. And the structure, the organization of how these themes are applied will also be tinkered with and finalized as we go through the management planning process. And so we like to show them because it is what was included in the feasibility study, but we also have the note of caution that we don't look at these as siloed. It's not you are this or you are that or you are this. There are going to be stories, places, resources within the heritage area that meet multiple of these themes and can tell a layered, really nuanced story with what they represent. So there may very well be some sites and resources that literally touch all 9. I don't think that would be actually all that uncommon. But this is sort of just gives an organizing, some organizing principles around some of the interpretive themes, but how they actually get applied and implemented, again, will be in a connected, layered manner and not just siloed. So with that, that kind of goes over how we got to the point where we are now, a little bit of information about the NHAs and what we did with the feasibility study. I'm going to turn it over to Alex to go over kind of where we are now and what we're going to see in the next year with specifically with regard to the management plan and what that looks like. So Alex, I'll let you take it from here.
Great. Thanks, Chris. So as Chris alluded to, our next step in making this heritage area a reality and going from that feasibility study to a full-blown program is to create something called a management plan. So this is something that is required by the Park Service. It is kind of, they call it your comprehensive policies and strategies for telling the story of your region's heritage and encouraging long-term resource protection, enhancement, interpretation, and funding, which is basically just a fancy way of saying it's your roadmap for what the heritage area will look like, what it will do, and how it will do it. So for this management plan, we have 3 years from designation. So that gives us until March of 2022 to complete this big plan and submit it to the National Park Service and eventually to the Secretary of the Interior for approval. Again, like to emphasize, it is completely non-regulatory. This is just a plan. It's not a set of rules that people in the heritage area have to follow. So although we only have a couple years to get this done, we haven't, like I said, we have until March 2022. We really think about this as setting the foundation for the heritage area. It's just kind of the first step of making things happen. And basically, one of the biggest things that we're trying to figure out throughout this next year is how can the heritage area be most useful to local communities, local organizations, local tribes, to the people that are already working in this area? How can we provide more value to them? So this management plan as a document will include basic directional guidance. So that includes some revised goals like the ones that Chris went through, and basically just a path, a direction that we're heading in. It will also include an interpretive plan, a resource inventory, which will not be comprehensive, but will highlight some different maritime resources within our area. A business and partnership structure. So how will the NHA be set up? How will it function? A framework for tribal collaboration, and that's now, but mostly going forward. How are we going to continue to work together? It will contain a marketing and branding plan. So what will the NHA logo look like? What will the identity be? And then finally, it will include an implementation plan, which is basically we're going to outline the kinds of programs the NHA is going to do. We're going to set some ground rules for how we're going to select new programs. So who's actually doing all this? Because you know that Chris and I are not doing all this on our own. That is impossible. And also I think would not end up with a very good plan. So first and foremost, anyone who lives, works, plays along the coast, so anyone who cares about our shorelines will have a chance to have input in this and will really help determine what the heritage area will look like. As I mentioned, we're trying to figure out how this can be the most valuable, and that's really what we're relying on you for, is to help tell us how this can be the most helpful for your community. So we at the Washington Trust for Historic Preservation, as the coordinating entity, we're kind of facilitating the outreach efforts and putting all the ideas together into a plan. In that effort, we have some help from a steering committee that, as Chris mentioned, we convened for the first time over the summer and have been meeting regularly to provide expertise and advice and general guidance for the project. We've also recently convened some smaller working groups and are still convening that are responsible for specific elements such as the marketing and branding plan or the implementation plan. And then finally, we're working with anchor organizations such as the Bellingham Whatcom County Tourism to help guide public engagement, to help get the word out through presentations like this, and to help share information with their communities. We really think of these anchor organizations as our boots on the ground for really trying to figure out how do we get the word out? How do we get that input that we need to make this as good as we can? So you will be hearing more from your anchor organizations and from us over the next few months about how you can get involved. But as just a kind of high level overview, we are going to be hosting some workshops, all virtual. We are planning everything to be virtual at this point. Some workshops, which will be focus groups, conversations about what you want to see with this heritage area. So we very much invite you to attend those, and we'll be sure to send everyone on this webinar details about those. We do have a survey out right now, which either Chris will put a link in the chat box or I will do that in a moment, just about kind of basic your values, a lot of the questions, similar questions to what we asked at the beginning of this presentation. We're also going to be doing some online mapping, which I will preview for you in just a moment because we're pretty excited about that. We're doing some polls on social media. Basically, there's a lot of different ways for you to get involved. At the end of the day, if you want to just take a look at the management plan that we've drafted and provide formal comment on it, great, we're going to do that too. But I do encourage you to sign up for email updates at that address on the screen. So preservewa.org/MWNHA, which again, I will put in the chat box. And then you'll get all of the information about how to get involved. So one thing that I did want to preview for you guys is like a way that you can help identify important resources along the coast is an online mapping tool that we're going to be launching in a couple weeks. You will see, if you look very closely, that this is all filler text and none of this is exactly what it will say unless you really like to speak Latin. And this map is going to be a tool for us to ask you and other people along the coast what resources are valuable to you along our coastlines. So you'll be able to add your own resources of any category. Here, you'll be able to add photos and stories, and then you'll also be able to explore other people's sites that they've added. And I will say this is just kind of a way for us to crowdsource that resource inventory and also to figure out what people are really valuing and using along the coasts. This may eventually turn into something that's a little more user focused, but for right now, this is just something that we're really excited to kind of get your input on. Chris, anything to add to that before I stop the screen share and go into some questions?
Let me get myself going again here. No, I think I think that's fine. I think that covers all the basics that we wanted to go over, and
Right.
we can move forward.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I did want to invite Deb Granger to say a few words. I know that we've been given kind of the high level overview of what this is going to be like overall. And I'm sure a lot of the questions and a lot of what Deb will help us answer is, why is this relevant to Whatcom County? So Deb, I will hand things over to you.
Great, thank you. I am Deb Granger. I know a lot of you on the call, I think. I can't see everybody who's on the call, but I am part of the Working Waterfront Coalition, and we are one of the anchor organizations up here. I also helped start Bellingham Sea Feast, which is a celebration of our waterfront. And I was a longtime high school educator. And I have the privilege also of commercial fishing, doing the reef netting off of Lummi Island. And I am so grateful to all of you for joining us. I also want to give a shout out to a man in Olympia named Chuck Fowler, whose basic energy and vision brought this forward. And I think he worked probably 10, 15, 20 years on this. So we have a lot to thank him for. As we in Whatcom County and all throughout this region assemble this plan, I like to think that we, you have to forgive me, I was an English teacher too, have the opportunity, I think of it as building a canoe. And that canoe has the potential of carrying us forward for centuries. So it needs to be stable and strong and secure. But each of us, as we assemble this plan, has our own tool and our own input into the building of this canoe. And all of the ideas for how we do this need to be collaborated and work together, but it has the potential of, this whole plan and this whole canoe has the potential of carrying us forward to lift and honor and respect this amazing resource that we've been gifted with, these waters and these shores and all the joy and love that we all experience on these areas. So we want to make sure, I just am so excited for this opportunity that we have to create this program that will lift, like I said, and enhance and steward and sustain this resource for generations to come, so that our children's 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 children can enjoy this waterfront. So please know that your voice, all voices are important and valued, and there's an opportunity. Representative from Whatcom County to the steering committee is Steve Walker, and he helped start and carry forward the community boating center here. So shares this same love, but please, please, please share your input, and we welcome everybody in the canoe. Thank you. I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Deb. That's a great metaphor. We might need to steal that. Well, I think we are going to open up for some questions now. We received a couple ahead of time, so I'll read those. If you did submit those ahead, thank you. And then also please do feel free to continue using that Q&A box. And I'll just read them aloud for the folks that are on the phone and potentially cannot see this. So looks like the first one we got, the question is from Janet Oakley. It says, there are at least 2 places where the Civilian Conservation Corps made an impact in the shoreline heritage, Deception Pass and down at the bottom of Hood Canal. I don't know how to say that one, Tuano State Park. How will their story fit in? Chris, I'm gonna punt that one to you.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a representative of state parks actually on the steering committee, number one. So we understand and acknowledge that state parks has a jurisdiction. There are a lot of state park units within this National Heritage Area as well. I think we did some mapping and I want to say it's like 97 or something like that. So as you can imagine, state parks is a great stakeholder and a great partner in this as well. So how does the story specifically about Civilian Conservation Corps fit in, or how does that get brought about? I think within the themes, you know, there's all kinds of possible programs and support and ways that the heritage area might, again, amplify or support what might be happening. One, just kind of thinking off the top of my head around this, you know, maybe there is a exhibit or there's some sort of educational program around the CCC on the shorelines. We know a lot about CCC in the mountains. We know about fire lookouts. We know about picnic shelters and things like that. What about that legacy, that impact on the shorelines as well? So I think it'll be very important to know about all those places, and the mapping tool that Alex mentioned earlier hopefully will be a way to help identify some of those as well. But certainly, when we look at history and different components like the CCC and what that meant, there certainly could be some programming around it, around that type of thing. So there's going to be, I think we're going to find all kinds of opportunities that are as specific as this, right? Where you have a CCC or you have some other component that we want to highlight or be able to raise and be able to share and amplify. I think the challenge is going to be knowing when to do that and how do we do that, right? Because our world of maritime heritage is really, really big. And as we continue to do the work of the National Heritage Area, how are we going to focus on you know, realistic goals, graspable things that we can implement, and look at down the road what things might be coming down the line. So it's going to be something that evolves, and we want to be realistic with how we start and not essentially not promise that we're going to do everything and everything all at once, but that we're going to be focused and work, most importantly, work with partners and help to support and promote what partners on the ground are already doing. And on the second poll question, there was just some great information that was put in there, and I appreciate the person who put it in there, all about a number of different things happening with Lummi, from longhouse restorations or reconstructions, and educational programs. And if you all still have that screen up, you'll see the entries in there. Things that are already ongoing with parks through San Juan Island, through the county, through others. You know, those are all, I think, highlight potential projects that the NHA can support and help to advocate for and get involved in. So there's really, the opportunity, I think, is what's really exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the I always love this because you hear about all these individual really interesting stories and projects and places. And I think the cool thing about the heritage area is that we'll be able to try to tie them all together and just provide this platform to help share those stories that maybe you haven't heard of because it's not in your area, or maybe it is in your backyard and you've just never heard of it before. So kind of actually on that note, a question that we received beforehand is, are there any projects planned to highlight Lummi and Nooksack use of cultural connection to land and sea? And I'm happy to answer that. I mean, the short answer is yes, we are looking at all options right now. As Chris said, we're trying to figure out which programs and projects can be the most helpful right now. And we are really looking forward to working with and are working with now different tribes throughout the area. Hopefully we'll be working with Lummi and Nooksack particularly to figure out how we can support work that they have going and their priorities.
I think that's great. I know there's some other people, they're not necessarily questions, but people are including some pieces in the chat. I know there was mention about some of the Croatian immigrants that came to the area. I know certainly about Gig Harbor and the legacy of Croatian fishing from Gig Harbor, and we know like the physical. Well, there's still a commercial fishing fleet, albeit smaller than it used to be, that runs out of Gig Harbor. But some of the physical remnants that are still around is this legacy of net sheds that dot what is a relatively small harbor, and what that means, how those might continue to be used to tell this story, even though a lot of them are privately owned and they're not publicly accessible, but they're visible. They're visible from the water and they're visible from the street as well. And I think I'd like to talk about those as an interesting example, because this isn't just history or something that was there, right? The net sheds in Gig Harbor are an incredible living, vital resource that continues to this day. There's still, some of them are still used by commercial fishermen. Some have been transformed into parks and places that are publicly accessible, but it's part of the authenticity, right, that our heritage area has. And that's, I think, a key important piece that again, we're not just looking back to what was, but we're looking at the authenticity that exists among our communities, within our communities, along the coast and along the shorelines. That is really what makes them so special today, and worthy of being a national heritage area. So it's great to see some of these stories, and that's just one. I know other people have written other things in the chat as well, about stories that they have or things that they're interested in. So that's really exciting.
So one more question we got beforehand, which Chris, I will direct to you, but Deb, definitely invite you to speak to this as well. How will the heritage area provide economic and social benefits for Whatcom County?
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer to that could be through increased heritage tourism. You know, again, we look at the National Park Service and their passport kind of program. I think there's a similar type of program around national heritage areas. We got a call. Gosh, I had an email or a call not a month after we received designation. And, you know, we were just starting to wrap our heads around, okay, next steps and what do we need to do? And it was a gentleman from Virginia saying, where's the visitor center? I want to come get my, NHA passport stamp so I can come visit. And so I think there's this link and connection to that broader national network of people who are heritage tourists. And it's a different thing from a tourist, a regular tourist overall. And there's some good data around this. Sandy knows this a whole lot better than I do, being on the tourism side of things. That heritage tourists tend to stay longer. They tend to spend more, and they also tend to, be involved in those things that are locally significant and locally authentic as well. So I think that is certainly one way that it can be helpful. The other way is, oftentimes, and sometimes we don't like to admit this, but oftentimes we do a better job of recognizing what we have in our own backyard when it's validated by people visiting or coming from elsewhere. And so I think there is the opportunity from an education standpoint to talk about the heritage area, the resources and value of it, to work to educate, local policymakers, other local industry, or to help influence decisions that might be ones that could be beneficial to the heritage area and to the region overall if made the right way, or could erase some of that if made the wrong way. So I think there's a benefit that comes out of a broader acknowledgement of the importance and significance of our community that can be used to help impact and drive policy as well. And that is something that is can certainly be a component of what the NHA does, is help advocate and support for policies that will further the mission and goals of the NHA. I'm seeing a couple questions come on just through the Q&A, which I'd like to answer. And one says, NHA, the National Heritage Area, is the platform. Content is user derived and expressed in the management plan. And the question is that an expectation that the management plan would include a list of existing cultural resources, landmarks, parks, sites, etc. And the answer to that is yes. Basically, a resource inventory is included with every management plan. And so that will be one that we have as well. And that resources inventory is, there was one done specifically for the feasibility study process about 10 years ago that is a good baseline, but we know it's not comprehensive and we want to find out more. We want to continue to populate that with more sites, with more resources. The mapping tool Alex talked about is going to be one tool that we are excited about for people to essentially crowdsource and provide that local information. Ultimately, is our management plan going to include a direct connection or a direct action for every single site in the resource? No, that wouldn't be possible in right at the beginning, but it does give us the backdrop for over time what we might be looking to. It helps us to look at themes or resource types as a group, as a collective over time. So that can be really, really helpful. And then another question is, will sites and programs need to apply to be recognized as a component of the heritage area? And that's a really, really good question. This is exactly what the management plan is set up to do, is to determine just what that looks like. I think the short answer, and I'll let Alex add to this as well, but I think the short answer is yes. There will need to be some arrangement, right? Some agreement to be sort of a quote unquote official partner. We don't know what that looks like yet, and that's why we want to go through these workshops and have our working groups and steering committee to help guide that. I think obviously anyone can say they're within the boundary of the National Heritage Area. They're along the shoreline. They're a quarter mile from the shore, from the waterfront, and so they're quote unquote in the NHA. But yes, there will, whether it's a memorandum of agreement, whether it's some sort of affiliate agreement, something that we codify in that way. Yeah, sites and programs will have kind of that officialdom to them. We just need to figure out what that looks like and how to do that.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. It's like Chris said, just something that we're figuring out as we go along. That's why we're doing public workshops. We're talking to people. We're working with lots of organizational partners just to figure out whether that makes, what that partnership structure looks like, how it functions, what benefits it can provide. Yeah, so we welcome all thoughts in that conversation, certainly.
Yeah. And there is a it's in the chat, but it's just pointed out the challenge of maintaining our maritime heritage, of which working waterfronts are a key feature, and a trend toward gentrification. What role might the NHA have in protecting and enhancing our harbor-oriented maritime sector? And again, another really good question, and one that's come up, and I can actually use the Gig Harbor example on this as well, because as kind of wonderful as Gig Harbor is from that history and some of the existing extant and still functioning historic resources, that's a little microcosm of that same sort of thing happening as well, right? You get gentrification, you get Waterfront, which is now really only accessible in some ways to the wealthy. So it's a really important question, and I think understanding that the NHA is non-regulatory, and I think that is key to continue to talk about. I mentioned earlier the advocacy role, and so where there might be policies or decisions coming up around working waterfronts, around permitting, around trying to balance the needs of shoreline management with authentic historic use of a site as well, all while looking at the environmental components to those also. I think the heritage area can play a role to advocate and help raise awareness about those decisions when they come up. So again, the commenter is absolutely right. The NHA is not primarily a political action agency, and it's not a 501c4 or whatever it is that engages only in lobbying or legislative work. But I think it can be a component from the standpoint of raising awareness, but also supporting programs that also talk about and highlight whether it's working waterfronts, whether it's healthy marine waters, whatever it might be. So in any event, I think that I appreciate the question, and looking at again what the possible roles might be for a heritage area.
I think that was all the questions we got in the Q&A, and that included all the ones that I got beforehand. Deb, you have a question?
Well, I just have a comment. When I first learned about this, I think I'm a visual person, and I just couldn't get my arms around what an NHA is and what it does. And so when I asked you for some samples of other NHAs around the country, and you gave me 2 or 3, that really helped me. So if you could put some of those in the chat. One of them was the Essex one in Massachusetts, I think, and then the other one, Mississippi Delta. And each of those areas are unique, but the way that they have assembled their plan and their programs just seems to give me a kind of a hook or a framework that I can kind of play with then for how, visualize what it might be for our area. And then the other thing I wanted to emphasize is that, the whole thing of tourism is scary, I think, to some people, because we have such a fragile ecosystem, and we want to make sure that we preserve that and do everything we can to preserve that. But I think that through these kinds of programs, that's how we bring understanding to it. And then people are more responsible stewards and careful. That's another benefit to Whatcom County.
Absolutely. I think that's well said. It's not about just, we want to get as many heads in beds as we can. Although, of course, great to share the story with more people. I think it's about working with people and bringing visitors that really want to engage and really care about and learn about the area.
And seek to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And learn. Yeah. And that's how they care for it. They end up caring for it then.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Deb. Chris, any last comments, or should we turn this back and ask you attendees some more questions? Maybe just one more.
One more, yeah. No, I think that's great. I've really appreciated all of the information that's gone into the chat, and we will be archiving that chat information, as well as the responses you all had to the poll, because again, this is all information that we are now using as we move forward with the planning process, and it's really informative and really helpful. So with that, I think we can move to our last question of you all, in which we'd like your feedback and input.
Absolutely. Bet you guys all thought you were done with that poll. You're not. So everyone grab your phones, click your links. Chris, I'm gonna ask you to put that in one more time, and go back to that same website. So again, for folks on the phone, that is www.pollev.com/WTrust650. We have one more question for you. And I'm going to leave this up for just a second, but this question is going to be more specific to your community. And what we're asking in this poll is, how can the Maritime Washington National Heritage Area best serve your community? And I do very much encourage you to answer this personally and locally. Again, this is very, very helpful information for us about how we can craft this program to be the most valuable. So I'm going to show the answers again. And again, this is like that second one you did. So you can answer with as many words as you want, and then you can vote other people's answers up or down, based on whether you agree with them. Okay, so we've got our first few answers here. We have awareness of our beautiful ecosystem, educational storytelling, demonstrating current value of our history and reconnecting towns to the water, tourism again, telling authentic stories of our region. I like there's a lot of little stories, storytelling.
Yeah.
Big themes with menu of activities. I like that phrase, menu of activities. Adds to our scenic byways and gives visitors a reason to stay longer. I really like that one too. I think something that's so wonderful about this area is that menu of activities is so long. There's so many cool, wonderful things to do along the coastline. And I think sometimes it's just a matter of being like, hey, you came to see this thing. Here's 20 other things you might like to do. Check these out as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of I like the being on the water, interaction of being on the water, right? That's come out a lot, that it's great to look at wonderful views, but we also want people to be on the water and experience what that is like in a variety of ways. Even
those of us that get a little seasick, it can be a good experience for everyone.
Got to get your sea legs under you, Alex.
I'm working on it. Environmental awareness, that's definitely a big one. Drawing those connections between heritage and the environment. And then I see federal and worldwide promotion of our unique region and history. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like we are at about 6 o'clock. We don't want to keep you guys for too much longer. I will, again, leave that poll up for a little bit longer. So if you think of a brilliant idea later this evening, please do feel free to put that in. And of course, keep voting on everyone else's. But with that, I will wrap things up. I will put one last link into the chat box just to our website so you can sign up for emails. But I will also say, if you have any questions, ideas, I love maritime puns. Please feel free to reach out to me. Always happy to chat. And we really hope that we see you guys at that virtual workshop, get your results in the survey. We're looking forward to continuing to hear all these great stories. This was the chat box was a wealth of knowledge here.
Absolutely was. Yeah, great information. I'll just echo Alex and saying thank you, and thanks to Deb and Sandy as well for helping to pull this together. Really wonderful to get such a good group, and we're really looking forward to continuing work on this.
Well, okay. Thank you. That about wraps it up. Thank you all for attending.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just before we leave, I want to shout out Daniel Kirkpatrick. I bet putting this heritage area together has been a real ordeal. That's a good one. Points for that, Daniel. Well done.
You get points. Absolutely, Daniel.
I give out points. We don't know what you get with them
We
yet.
do keep track, but yes.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.